And we are live. Welcome to Totally Unscripted. My name is Warren Hoxie. Cara, oh yeah, Charles, Alice, twice in a row. I'm getting professional at this. So anyway, we had a little break, but we are back. And we thought we'd close off this kind of first half of the season with something very close to our hearts. I think, Charles, you're going to talk a little more to what we're talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely. And so first of all, yeah, we've been away for a little bit. I refer to this as conference season because we had Next and we had IO and we've had a bunch of IO extendeds and then we've done a bunch of GDG groups and a bunch of us have been traveling. So the fun things we've been out talking to people about what they're doing and frankly, in the case of this show, what they're not doing. And we figured we want to come back and close this first half of our season 5 off with some observations and maybe a little bit of something to bring people in and actually talk a little bit more about really the beauty of AppScript. We've noticed that in our traveling, a lot of people don't discover it. I mean, it's kind of weird. Very nice hearts, Alice. And we think it's the best kept secret that's being left on the table. So a couple things about the show. First of all, if you're a regular listener, first of all, thank you. What we'd love for you to take away from the show is simply share that love and get people excited and get more people doing AppScript. That said, if you stumbled across the show, whether you did a search and you found us on YouTube or you're simply looking to learn more about AppScript, what we really want to do is let you know that it's really accessible and really powerful that you can do things with on your own. It's really like giving superpowers to the way you use Workspace, and it allows you to automate essentially anything you do. So the goal of this show is to welcome you to the AppScript family. So with that, who wants to take it? What is AppScript? Why is it interesting? And what's the very first thing you would let a non-believer, so to speak, know about AppScript?
Where do we start? Who wants to go first?
I would love to hear either Martin's or Alice's definition of AppScript, since I have to define it regularly at work. I want to hear
queen of documentation.
Landing.
I think you captured it, Charles. Well, on a basic level, gives me superpowers. So there's a lot of magic. I still get fascinated just watching spreadsheets update after I click that run button.
Well, let's just start with the fact that it is code.
It is code, yeah.
But it's accessible to people.
So go into that, Alice. I mean, obviously it's code, and that makes a lot of people afraid. And
it does make them afraid, but it's only 4 letters.
So one of the things
I literally learned AppScript in 1 hour, and that is not a joke at all. And this is pre Gemini and any of the things that would help me out with that. So I had an idea in my head that I would really love to have a spreadsheet, because I'm a teacher. So I have a list of my students' names, and I wanted a tab in a spreadsheet with every student's name on it. And I thought, this is going to take me like years. Like, this is my holy grail. And I had an hour before my plane was going to go off. And I thought, well, I'm just going to Google search Google AppScript, because a Googler had mentioned it to me. I literally did not know what it was or what it would do or anything about it. And the method is insert sheet. I'm like, I know what that does. Like, you go through and you look at the code. It's so readable. It does what it says. So if you can just think it like, I want to do these steps. Not only can you do it with AppScript, it's multiple choice. So I went from literally zero. I Google searched it for the very, very first time an hour before I got on my plane. I was able to create that script, and I think I have 26 million installs on that right now. I was able to create that script, create a template, make a blog post, and get on the plane on time.
Wow. Well, you're a lot quicker than me.
Results may vary.
Right, so Al, I love that story, but let me dive in a little bit deeper. You said code, and again, it's a spooky 4-letter word for some folks. But AppScript is different. What would you tell someone, again, who's less technical or even not technical, who doesn't really code or want to code? How is it different? How is it accessible? Why did you feel comfortable versus saying, doing full heavy development that a professional developer does?
Well, I think that's just is. It's not the full, heavy, professional things a developer does. I've been feeling like I had wanted to learn to code, and I bought a bunch of books on PHP and Cocoa, and this is way back in the day. And they sat on my shelf because you open that book, it just looks intimidating. And I never got further than buying the books and feeling like I wish I could code. And so, but when you look at AppScript, it is not intimidating like starting any, in my opinion. Right? Like I said, I looked at them before and got stalled just on opening the book up. And as opposed to with AppScript, all you really need to know is what do you want to code? Do you want to code forms? You type form app. You want to code Google Docs? Type document app and push period. And it gives you a multiple choice list and it's readable. And that just makes it really accessible to anybody else. And I, of course, want to build on that with more modern tools, but I'll wait.
Awesome. So Martin, how about you? What got you here?
I was quite fortunate. I was following someone who was blogging about anything that was new and up and coming, and they started writing about AppScript, and I think at that point it was you had to have a Google Apps account, or G Suite or Google Workspace. So I actually signed up. That's how I got my Google Workspace domain, was to do that. But now, quickly after that, they opened it to everyone, even on your regular Gmail account.
Yeah.
And it kind of, for me, I was looking for something low entry point. I was working for an education advisory service, and I was looking. Teachers never have money, but they're completely creative with tools that are given to them. So here's this product, AppScript, completely free, integrated into spreadsheets. Anyhow,
Sounds like a spreadsheet.
Yeah, teachers use lots of spreadsheets, I discovered. So it was a perfect marriage. I think I was really fortunate as well. This was 14 years ago. AppScript is a product. You used it in Google Sheets. You had access to calendar, and mail, but it wasn't a huge long list of services that there is now. So I think for new people, it can be quite daunting that virtually every single Google Workspace product you can interact with Google AppScript.
Not sites yet.
So it can be quite daunting in that respect, but it is that magic of I'd done some programming at school and university, but it wasn't my full-time job. The fact that AppScript, in terms of the coding language it's using, it's JavaScript, which is like the most popular programming language in the world, which meant that even back then that you could go to sites like Stack Overflow or just Google search, you could find stuff.
Use Google search.
And there were a lot of, because of its kind of appeal to educators, there were a lot of educators writing about it. So I was not only just discovering finding other things other people had made with AppScript. Romain, the king of AppScripts. If you need a mail merge, go to Romain. Although he's diversified now. That's how I met him. He basically did an events management thing with Google Sheets and Forms and Calendar, which I just looked at what was amazing and just went and made my own. Which so I think it's there are so many things in the world that orientate around data, and the fact that in a couple lines of code you're interacting with data and you're doing new stuff with data, you're getting more value out of your data and you're saving time. So
that's a better four-letter word, time.
Yeah. So
data, now you're scaring people again.
When you start developing AppScript, the thing you can do is create scripts and then just get them to run 24/7 for you. You don't even need to be at the keyboard, and you look like a superhero doing magic with data, solving world problems or your own personal problems. Awesome. I really encourage not come across the product before. In fact, this is a slide I often used with my talks. It's been there for 14 years.
Not
It's still
exactly.
amazing.
They did change that menu a little bit.
Yeah, they have.
Yeah, they've moved stuff around, but
It more explicitly says AppScript now. So what's your excuse?
yeah. So the number of times I mention that to people and they're like, oh, people need to be more curious about what's in their interface.
That's a great
I'd
point.
be out of a job if that was true.
I always wonder why people just don't go across the menus and look for things, but they don't. I think part of it is people need to see things. So hold on, Carol, we're going to come back to you in a second, get your starter story, but I want to go back to something Martin said, I think is super important. I want to share some resources here. The great thing about AppScript is it's not just us four doing it. As you mentioned, there's other people out there doing it. In fact, there's nearly 2 million people working on AppScript every week, weekly users. So there's a lot of people writing codes. Nearly 40 billion executions of AppScript are going. So there's a phenomenal community out there that you can go to. So for example, if you have questions, you can go to the Google Groups community. That's actually hosted by some of our GDEs and get your questions answered. You already mentioned Stack Overflow. By the way, all these assets and tags will be in the description of this video. We also have a Google run one called our Workspace Developer Connect Community. So you can ask these questions anywhere, anytime, and there's somebody who's already probably built it, has the code ready, has the code to share, knows the answers. So you're not alone. You can build those things. That said, our documentation is pretty awesome. So our start page for our documentation, developers.google.com/AppScript, which is a perfect segue back to Kara, who actually hosts this and has built this and knows a lot about this, but you weren't always an app scripter. How did you get here?
I was not always an AppScripter. I actually, when I started at Google, I was writing for Google Sheets for end users. And that is how I discovered AppScript. It was kind of a culmination of things that happened. I was writing for Google Sheets and I had seen in the toolbar this thing called AppScript, and I didn't really know what it was, but
one of the curious.
Yeah, that's so curious. But at Google, we have these great internal classes that other Googlers can give. And one of them was an intro to AppScript. And so I took the class and I had never coded before, light experience with HTML and CSS, but like nothing JavaScript related. And the great thing about it was that it was also kind of an intro to JavaScript where, you were learning things like what is a variable, what is a method, and how do you chain those together. And so that was most of the class, was just the basics of what those things are, because to Alice's point, once you get into the AppScript editor and you start typing things like spreadsheet class or spreadsheet app, it'll give you, the documentation as you're typing to let you know what methods are available and what actions you can take. And so it's very intuitive. On the other side of that, internally, we were going through some process changes and we needed to set up a system that could handle feedback that we were getting from all sides. So we were implementing a new process that included vendors, stakeholders, and our team members. And we wanted to capture feedback from all of these people. And we had feedback captains that needed to be alerted about this feedback and respond to it accordingly. And so I knew based on my learnings about AppScript that like we could automate this sort of thing. And so a lovely Googler by the name of Megan Watkins, who used to be on the team, walked me through writing my very first script. And we were able to create a form and sort the form into different sheets once the information came in. Using a script based on, a field in the form, we were able to automatically send email alerts to our feedback captains. We were able to mark things as sent, mark things as reviewed, just all automatically. And that's when I was like, oh, wow, I see the magic. I see why this is so valuable, because this would take people hours and constant rechecking if AppScript didn't exist. There was no easy way to do this without it. So from there, it's like, it was like the gateway drug to every other script I've ever written, because I just wanted that feeling again of creating something that felt magical.
So there is something I think Alice alluded to, and Kara, you just reaffirmed it. And Martin, you mentioned it too. It's something bizarrely weird when you get that instant gratification that something just worked for you and you see it happen before your eyes. A lot of programming, you program, and you don't get that immediate gratification feedback. AppScript and Workspace is kind of like, oh, I want to put a value in that cell. Oh, look, the value is in the cell. Oh, look, I want the menu to pop up. Oh, a menu popped up. I love the fact that it doesn't feel laborious. It feels very interactive. It almost feels like you're having a conversation when you're doing it. One of the problems I think a lot of people have is they don't really understand what are some of the things you can do with it, right? And we all say the sky's the limit. In fact, if you're looking for an overview of what you can do, I got a couple of great resources here. Again, up on Kara and team's site. There's a great overview page that kind of breaks it down for you. There's a ton of different ways you can actually extend the UI. And again, Kara built this page that help you show 1,000 different ways you can do it. And if you want to get started, we have tons of samples that, again, our team has put together, including Martin's actually contributed to this site as well, too, with his ubiquitous mail merge on. And then there's a ton more up on GitHub. Kara, what's my favorite saying? The best code is code
that's written for you.
And so there's tons of stuff you can pull down and take, right? And you can use that. And the one thing I always tell folks is first of all, dream big and figure out what you can do. You can also look into the marketplaces. There's a public marketplace where there's code written for you that you can actually, and most of these are free. Also, folks inside your domain may have some that you may want to use as well too. And again, if you're in the EDU space, you're doing a lot with students or utils. Alice, you've got 27 add-ons now too. So the great thing is you're not reinventing the wheel. You're normally borrowing code in a lot of cases to get things done. Because again, the job is to get things done. That said, and again, we're making this sound super easy, and I think it is.
I wonder, Charles, if we can just wind it back a bit. I've never heard your origin story.
Yeah.
I've known you for years.
So my backstory is easy, but it goes actually before AppScript. It goes a long time ago because I've been around for a long time. I actually started off as an investment banker, and I literally was one of the few people at the time that actually was given a PC at our desk. Again, within a long time. And we did everything with manual paper. And I started automating everything with spreadsheets. And I quickly realized I like to automate computers more than I like to do banking. So I switched over, but I will say this out loud, I'm totally unscripted. I spent an awful long time in the Microsoft ecosystem using VBA. When I switched to Google and I wanted an easier path of working, I picked up a book by the show founder, Bruce McPherson, which was converting from VBA to AppScript. As I already knew I wanted to do it, and I knew it had to be relatively easy because Workspace is a lot easier to build and deploy solutions than Office was at the time. And so for me, it was just changing language, but doing the same type of things. My backstory is real simple. I will spend an hour automating something that would take me 5 minutes. So I hope I can actually automate things faster going forward. So I love that satisfaction of building things. I build so many different tools and things just for my own personal use. That's kind of amazing.
That's probably a good segue into what have you automated, Charles?
I've automated a lot of things. In fact, this show is automated. Everything we do to build the documentation out, everything we do to actually put these overlays up. So for example, when you see these things, like how do you get started? You go to the AppScript dashboard. All these overlays, all those QR codes, everything is actually created using AppScript. And the thing is, I'm doing a lot of these things, right? I need to get started and build a lot of these things. Why would I do it over and over again when we're hosting many episodes? In fact, if you will let me indulge you for a second, let me pull up to the stage here. A couple ways to get started. So first of all, I just popped up a link there where it says script.google.com. I'll actually make that a little bit bigger. It looks a little small here. At least it does for me. Yeah. You'll notice you're not alone to get started. You can come in here and say script.google.com or even script.new and come through and create projects, manage projects, but also notice you get a lot of blank templates and some great references to get started. So as I mentioned, easy to get started. But that said, we have an episode doc. In our episode doc, and again, if you look across the top here and you're curious, you can find AppScript here, but I've actually created a episode builder right here, which what it does is it takes my inputs and it goes through and it creates an episode folder, an episode document, the calendar invites, it adds everybody to it. It does all this because, again, we do this bi-weekly. It is super awesome to do that. So real fast, I'll just show you how it works. I'll say create episode. Let's build up an episode. And notice I'm using things like smart chips. You'll notice I use as much of the product as possible for Friday. So again, the beautiful thing, and Alice alluded to this, it's coding, but you don't do full coding because I'm using Workspace for things like my data, for my inputs, for my UI. So when I run this, I'll just simply say, create that, and you'll notice it'll run here. It'll go for a second. It's actually going to do things, and you'll see it actually puts all the links right back in here, so I don't have to look for them. I don't have to search for them. I don't have to find them. It takes a second because it's doing quite a bit, but I'll show you here. In a second, we actually have a folder, a doc, and a calendar invite. So if I would click the calendar invite, you can see I just created that. I can go to it real fast and see it's already been created. All the information's put in there, everything we need. And again, sure, I could do that myself, but I do it every other week, over and over.
Doing something over and over.
And so just to give you an idea, this is the entire code folder that does that. So we're talking
Yeah, but that's multiple functions too. And I was going to say, like, all these things that you're saying, I bet they're less than 10, 20 lines of code. I mean, You got slightly more than that, but not really.
Well, think about it. I'm working with Drive. I'm working with Calendar. I'm working with Docs, and I'm doing everything I need to do to produce a show, documentation-wise, but without needing to do, that myself.
And to Alice's point, I mean, look at these methods, right? Document at, get active document. It's very intuitive. It's very easy to understand as you're going through and building these methods.
Zoom in a little bit, Charles.
So just flip it over for a second, again, just to show you kind of the other side of this. You notice I pulled up all those banners. We create our screen. We actually use slides to create all this content. So if I was to come in here, for example, here's how I created Alice's. I don't create these QR codes. I use AppScript to do it. I don't build these banners out. I simply put it in the notes and I make it work. And so again, you can see I created literally many of these for this episode by simply running some code that does it. And again, you'll notice I use the menus up here where I can add buttons to automatically download these. I can create codes by demand or actually create them from the slide. So just a real easy, neat way to do it. And again, stuff I don't want to do over and over again, that I do.
I love your use of emojis in the menu, by the way. Very clever, very fancy.
Yeah, always does. So, and it's funny you bring that up. If I just pop into the code for a second, and again, you can see this. There's where I loop through all the selected slides to figure out which slides are selected. Here's the code where I build those overlays out. And again, I'm using the power of Workspace to do with just a little bit of code. The ability to export as a image, the ability to manage shapes, the ability to build buttons out, for example. You saw that. It's kind of neat as well, too. Then, of course, you talked about how do I do that. That's all the code it takes to build out a menu. And then I simply have the functions that I'm calling. And notice, again, it's nothing fancy. I actually just paste those emojis in there and it works. So it looks great and actually impresses your colleagues like I just did. But it also makes it more visual and easier to work with. So super awesome. So end of story.
All right.
So,
or no, Martin's going.
Alice, go ahead. Show us something.
Well, I was in New York at a GDG and I asked, it was a large group. I mean, it's New York. And I asked them, who here uses AppScript? And it's a room of developers. And only 3 people raised their hand. I said, you are in luck. Can you put my other screen up? I go, you're in luck because today you're all going to walk away being able to use AppScript. So I literally had everybody in the room fill out a Google form and I live coded in front of everyone. Hey, I have this Google form, pasted the link to my form. I have this Google Slides, paste the link to my Google Slides. What I want to do is I want to take the responses from the 3rd question and insert it on a slide and insert it into the 20-second slide so it shows up so we can see everybody's responses. And all I have to do is hit the copy button and paste into that AppScript thing in live time in front of everybody. Like if you can describe it, what do you want? You can now code it. It's literally accessible to everyone. And then I went to Boston after that and did a 2-hour workshop on coding Google AppScript. Now, I've been teaching people how to code Google AppScript for years. And at the end of a 90-minute, 2-hour session, you'd walk away, like Kara said, well, I know what a variable is and some of the key elements. We're going to talk about a loop, but you're going to have to put in some effort into doing some really basic things like having code rename your files until you get a little bit more comfortable with it, where it kind of feels stupid. And now this script where I have my Google Forms go to my Google Slides is something I've been using for years as like a magic trick. When I do a presentation, it literally became accessible for every single person to do the very first day they start learning AppScript. Gemini.
So who's writing the code for you?
Gemini, Google Gemini.
So true story in that when Gemini was first, when it was called Bard and they were using it internally, I used to always find myself, the most common place I would go would be Stack Overflow. And Stack's still a great resource. But then I realized that Bard/Google Gemini was actually crawling Stack Overflow. And now I not only ask for syntax advice, I actually ask for entire routines. And it's funny how well it does. You actually can get a lot of the code written for you by simply knowing what to ask for. Yep. So I think one of the hardest things to know about using AppScript is really, what do you want it to do? Not how does it work? Like, what are all the possibilities? What are all the use cases? I've even found you can even ask Gemini, can I do this or can I do that? Or is this possible? And it will even tell you this is possible or not possible. So obviously it's reading things like, again, all the documentation that Karen and her team put out. It's reading all the stuff that Martin's done on AppScript Pulse for years and shared. And so it's just a great aggregator, and it's really a first stop. By the way, there's AppScript Pulse if you haven't checked it out. If you're new, where Martin aggregates all the content in the AppScript world pretty regularly, which is a great crawling resource. But it's amazing.
Yeah,
I think as well with Gemini, it's a game changer in terms of, as you say, Charles, to begin with, we were just searching for answers. Now we're having a conversation with a virtual agent. And, I find Gemini is quite good at generating AppScript code. It's not always perfect, right. But go back to Gemini and just say, this is the error message I've got. Yeah. How do I fix this? And Gemini quite often apologetically will say, oh, I'm sorry, you're right. You should do this instead. So for me, in terms of, my day job is writing AppScript code. I'm constantly doing stuff in Gemini to generate stuff. But as Charles mentioned as well, there are, Stack Overflow, I think, is quite a scary place if you're starting out scripting or coding. There is the Google group, which is a much friendlier place, I would say. You can ask anything there, and people will not judge you. They will try and help you, because a lot of them will be like you. They're just starting out, and they would have been on that exact same journey. They might have that little nugget of information that you need to unlock your kind of next step. But Gemini, for me, it's changed it a lot in terms of making stuff and doing stuff. It is up to you to describe what you want and go nuts.
Carrie, you had something to say. What was your point?
Oh, yeah. It was almost the same thing as Martin. Basically, I love using Gemini as my own personal debugger. I send it every single error message I get because it's going to find the error faster than I am or know what it means. And, I I love AppScript, but I often run into errors because I'm not perfect either. So it's exponentially sped up my ability to create a working script.
Absolutely. I have a tip for anybody who's actually just new trying it. AppScript is obviously well documented, and as we mentioned, 14 years old. There's a lot of built there around it. But also in your prompt, if you specifically are doing something like working with arrays or working with dates or things that are kind of common JavaScript based, in your prompt, ask for JavaScript as well too. You can sometimes try both. Don't just rely on AppScript, because sometimes, again, early days, but sometimes it doesn't get the AppScript perfectly right. But if you ask for JavaScript on the more common things, it's amazing what it actually will come up with.
I think also if you find there's a lot of AppScript code out there, I try and find it all, but I can't. When you do find code, you can put that code into Gemini and say, explain this to me. And it's a great learning tool just to try and understand.
Martin, do you ever do that with code you wrote?
Well,
I wrote this
yes.
20 years ago. What does it do? Yeah. So a couple of the resources I want to share. And then Martin, I know you had a visual you wanted to share, but a couple of things to get started. And again, I know Kara and your team put some of these things out. Things like quick starts. Again, a little bit of code to get you going with a guided walkthrough. So you can check out here how you build a custom function, which, by the way, custom functions and sheets was the impetus for why AppScript was even invented in the first place. Another good one, there's a little intro. Actually shows you how to use AppScript and Maps, believe it or not. A lot of different products, not just Workspace products, but a lot of different Google products, and even beyond, are accessible from AppScript. One of the most common questions I get from folks is, how do you reach outside of Workspace? So, for example, Kara and I did a session at I/O and in Google Cloud Next, where we show how you bring Jira data into Gmail. And people were like blown away by that. I'm like, that's just AppScript. AppScript is the ability to reach out to any other RESTful API, connect with it, and it's basically your, kind of like your open gateway to things not Workspace to bring them into Workspace. So it's super amazing. So Martin, what can you show us?
Well, one of the things, so when you're doing AppScript projects, I find that you can quickly do your code, and then if you want to make it look, like user interfaces and things like that, it's like you're 10xing your time. Google Sheets, I think, is a great interface for if you're developing scripts that other people are going to use. Google Sheets is a great interface for you just to put things like statuses, settings, data out. So there are a couple of kind of my tips around that is there are some downsides to spreadsheets in terms of people just inserting stuff and doing, just breaking your stuff. Use the functions and the facilities in Google Sheets. Use things like protected ranges so people can't screw up. Use named ranges. So if you're familiar with named ranges, you're basically specifying a cell in your spreadsheet. You're giving it a name. It doesn't have to be a single cell. It can be a range of cells. But if someone comes along and then inserts something, a column somewhere else, you're golden still. So here's a kind of very basic example where I've got a status box. I'm using things like conditional formatting. So depending on the text in the box, it'll change different colors. You can see on the side here, I've got my little named ranges. So I've got my status. I've got things like email address and address and email. Let me just give those a quick color so you can see because it's funny because the example Charles mentioned in the code lab is the one I want to just quickly show. As we mentioned before, AppScript, you can get through the extensions menu. Zero setup, right? So you're clicking in here and you've got your script editor straight off. So there's nothing else for you to do, and there's lots of magic that goes on behind the scenes that Google are doing in terms of setting things up for you.
So you're in dark mode, Martin. Most people won't see dark mode unless you put the extension in.
Yeah, when you start coding day in, day out, you find things that make it a bit easier for your eyes.
I just don't want most folks to think that it comes up black and they think they're the wrong and yours comes up white. The default is white.
So you will find there are some nice Chrome extensions. So this is, I think it's called Black Script, which just gives me a nice little black window instead, but a bit easier on my eyes for coding. There are some other nice ones as well out there. So, but in terms of, for example, this code was actually written by Gemini, which is why it's got lots of comments in it. Because I wouldn't put lots of comments and stuff.
But Gemini is not lazy.
But as Kara and Alice were mentioning, you've got these things, this. Sometimes think of it like a tree. It's like the spreadsheet app is the main branch of what you can do with spreadsheets. And then the little dots basically take you down a branch of doing stuff. So if you're not familiar with coding, we define things like variables. But when you start typing in here and you do your period sign, basically it tells you the next thing down your tree that you can do. So we've got all these different things that we can do to this sheet. We can append rows, we can add viewers to the sheet, lots of other bits and pieces. In this particular one, I'm just getting my named ranges. It's doing some little error checking validation in there. And all it's doing is, for this particular function, getting a status and setting a status. When you're writing your code in AppScript, you learn that you have to wrap everything in one of these functions. So basically, these functions get pulled up to the top here that allows you to run these functions. So I've got this test function, which I'm just going to run, and hopefully you can see executed. I can run a reset. So I'm just resetting that cell back. But I'll show up very quickly. But the maps one, so it's not just spreadsheets. I don't know why they put spreadsheet app and not sheet app, but we'll come back.
Because it came out before it was branded.
Because a sheet is
true.
a component of a
Well
spreadsheet.
done. Yeah. I thought I'd catch you out with that one, but I didn't. Maps. So you got Google Maps. So just to quickly explain what this little function is doing, it's sending a map. So we're actually using the functions that we've got in the code to set this status here to say we're getting a map. We're gonna, similar to the get and set status, we're gonna get our address, which is our named range. And then some of these get more tricky in terms of what they're doing, but hopefully it still makes sense. We're getting a static map, we're adding a marker to it, and we're just using our address. And I've just put Edinburgh Castle, Edinburgh. So the nice thing about Google and Google Maps is it can do that stuff. You can give it partial addresses and it's quite happy. And then last bit on this function is it's actually sending mail. And so it's like the very first demo of AppScript I saw was a mail merge, obviously stuck in my brain. So I'm just going to run this now and let's see, hopefully, it's running in the background. You hopefully saw that flash up is running and executing and doing its bit. And if I jump over to my inbox and just give it a quick refresh, here we go, map. There's Edinburgh Castle, if people were wondering. So yeah, I get stuck in, start exploring. I think Google Sheets is a good way to, just play with data, get your data doing other cool and interesting things. Find the joyful projects first. Don't go head on into I've got this uber complex process I need to solve. Find something small. That's my tip.
That's a great tip, Martin. A lot of folks think they need to boil the ocean or have the complete answer. Like I said, I have scripts that sort a range of sheets, sort data in a sheet, and I use them all the time. And they're a couple lines of code. In fact, some of them in Sheets, there's this thing in Sheets called the macro recorder, where you can literally perform steps in Google Sheets. It'll write the app script for you. And so the beautiful thing there is, again, if you're not confident or don't have time, or you simply want the answer fast, you don't have to write the code. The code can get written for you. You can write these macros and run these macros with hotkeys and straight from the menus and stuff. So it's really accessible. Start small, think big, dream big. You can automate nearly anything.
I would argue, sorry.
Good.
I would argue that it's easier to do AppScript than some spreadsheet things. So I was at NA Connect after Google I/O, and this guy's showing me this super complicated formula that he has. I'm like, yeah, I guess you can do that in your spreadsheet, but it would be so much easier to just put it into AppScript. Like it would just literally be easier.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah, Sheets formulas for me are, I get so overwhelmed by if it goes beyond just one simple formula and I test things and it becomes very long on one line, it's like I can't read it, but I do enjoy the way that code is actually formatted and I can read it up top to bottom versus trying to comprehend one line of code with lots of parentheses.
We lost you, Charles. Come back to us.
Sorry, I muted. I said, yeah, you do get a little overwhelmed with the braces and the semicolons and the commas sometimes, but it does come pretty naturally. Karen, I want to ask you a question because you obviously see a lot of data. And don't share any data that you can share, but you see a lot of data from folks that obviously come to the documentation site. Just give folks an example of what people are doing or maybe even their backgrounds if you have the information. First of all, how popular is the documentation for AppScript? Like how, again, if you can share anything with us, like what's some of the usage of it?
Yeah, I mean, I won't go into numbers, but it is the most viewed documentation set for the Workspace platform. So when we talk about extending Workspace or even building with Workspace APIs, most people are using AppScript, and a lot of that is because most people are creating scripts and automations for their organizations. You know, there are a lot of people creating these third-party add-ons that help other organizations, but a lot of people are just line of business workers trying to figure out a very specific problem. And those are the people that are coming to AppScript and just trying to figure out something that can meet their needs. It doesn't have to be polished. It doesn't have to be seen by anyone but them or their team. And they come to AppScript for that, to find what they need and to be able to do it quickly without standing up a tech stack and figuring out how to connect to these APIs.
And what is some of the things they most commonly look for besides Martin's mail merge sample?
Honestly, Martin, I mean, you are responsible for most of that. Yeah.
And the most probably Gmail spam as well. I'm probably responsible for that as well.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, the most popular areas of our documentation are always going to be samples and reference documentation. You know, we have plenty of guides that are great for people, especially just getting started. But even with myself, when I want to learn something, the first thing I look for is someone who's already done it. Like you said, Charles, best code is code that's already written for you. And even if it's just close to something that you're trying to do to get you to a place where you say, oh, okay, I just need to edit these lines and it'll fit my use case. So the samples are super popular. And then the reference documentation to get them to that next step of what methods are available for me to update this code in order to get it to do what I need to do.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So folks, we're almost at time. First of all, thank you all for tuning in and watching the recording or checking out live. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you want to build something. Hopefully you're inspired. We're going to take a little hiatus, but we'd love to know what folks think. So drop us some feedback. Let us know how we're doing. If you'd like to learn more, if you're a regular, please share the word. AppScript is amazing. If you're new, please build something. Don't be afraid to try it. Please do let us know. We hope to be back when the summer clears. Any parting words, anybody, inspirational things to get folks writing AppScript or just in general from Totally Unscripted Season 5?
You can do it. Don't be afraid. Use Gemini for help.
In its 45 minutes, you could have already learned AppScript.
What are you doing? Wasting your time watching us when you could.
Here.
Great one. All right. Well, Martin, I think it's more appropriate than ever for you to send us out with the keywords that everybody needs to hear.
Thanks, folks, and happy scripting.